Whoa, loud.
It was loud. So we're back with part two. I feel like we can land this plane. I already have that confident feeling heading in, which is probably often revealed to be cocky, but here we are.
I do too. I've learned a lot. I feel like my research last time was, as the kids say, suboptimal these days. So I've increased my last minute cramming from 5 minutes to maybe 45 minutes.
Ooh.
The interesting thing that happened on our first part of this episode is Ice, the bad guy,
Hmm.
is that Brendan didn't offer a lot of pre-research as he often does. And I realized in that moment that I'm probably become a little over-dependent on Brendan supplying a lot of the research,
Hmm.
which is, right before the show, we were just talking about becoming dependent on systems, maybe without knowing it.
Oh, yeah.
So this time around, we had a little bit of back and forth. I don't know if you decided that consciously or if you just couldn't help but, you know, reactivate some research and philosophizing.
Hmm.
And I spent a bit more time weaving in. So part of the experiment with this one too, specifically for me, is I think Brendan's done a lot more of weaving with AI and uh, deliberating with AI before these episodes. So I've been doing a little more of that this time. And also weaving that in with some direct experience, including a specific training relevant to this topic. I, being Andy Swindler,
And I, being Brendan McNamara.
that training specifically was a Know Your Rights training based in a little suburb outside of Chicago, where people have become quite organized, as I think is true in many cases. I've certainly heard many stories from Minneapolis, probably the most sort of news headline worthy place recently related to ICE, which I would like to dig into a little more this time. I don't think we even touched on Minneapolis last time.
Hmm.
Um, I found this training valuable. It was long. It was almost 2 hours. In fact, we left just slightly before it ended, just because it was a lot. Some of it I just found to be downright valuable information. Like, what does a judicial warrant look like? I mean, just
Yeah.
really basic. Like, hey, this is what this is the within the system we live in, within the laws that exist. This is what law enforcement people are allowed to do, and this is the paperwork they need to do certain things, such as enter your home. I thought, gosh, that's valuable. I don't know. I mean, hopefully, most of us learn that they need a warrant, but I don't know what it looks like. And apparently, there's a huge difference between an actual judicial warrant versus uh, a warrant that somebody from ICE might write, which is like something
Yeah.
that we could have made on print.
Administrative warrant. Yeah.
Administrative warrant, there you go, that we could have made from a print shop in the 80s and just sort of sign it with whatever we want. And and then the other one that really stands out was recognizing the officers that there are in Illinois here, I guess very specific laws around the shape of the badge. Like only an actual police officer can wear a star-shaped badge,
Mm.
and only a police officer can wear an actual full uniform. But apparently anybody can wear something with the word police on it,
Mm.
and that happens quite often. So, it was very specific, as we said last time about this kind of reverse neighborhood watch situation about
Yeah.
identifying uh, ICE, enforcement agents, and then some of this I've done direct action stuff in the past, largely surrounding what was happening in the protests in 2020. So some of this was familiar just in terms of how to engage or more specifically not engage. And that was interesting because I have to admit, part of me was like, well, why not mess with them? Why not pick a fight? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, actually, that reminds me of one of the things that is probably easy to back up, which is that they're, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. They're just not very well trained, and particularly with weapon usage, weapon holding. At least anecdotally, I don't think they said this in the training, but I heard. somebody else saying like, yeah, there's the gun advocates who are looking at videos of ICE and just saying, oh my God, like that's dangerous. Like they're literally pointing their gun at their colleague and whatnot. So uh, those are the things that stand out. I would say, yeah, informative. Um, like I said, more general. I think more just probably the most informative part was like just almost stuff like you can imagine learning in school. It's like, hey, here's the Constitution, here's the law, here's what a warrant looks like, etc.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the rest of it interesting. I don't know. Hard to. I don't imagine myself like out on patrol in any way. And that's part of what we're, I think, discussing here is like, is that even a worthwhile activity for anybody? Um, so I don't know. The rest of it seems more theoretically interesting
Oh, okay, got you.
than
Did
immediately
they,
valuable. Yeah.
was it, did you feel like it was a pretty neutral training overall? Or did it feel kind of particularly partisan, meaning did it relate in any way to our topic specifically? Like, was there anything painting, let's say law enforcement in this case, or ICE or whatever, as implicitly or explicitly the quote unquote bad guy, whether overt or general assumption based across multiple references, I suppose.
Well, they were explicitly compared to Gestapo and Nazis,
So
which
I
is
would say
usually not a way
that's
to compliment people.
I would go ahead and said that that was the bad guy. And then why, like, what principle was being violated that would allow them to be painted as the bad guy? Like, what's the taxonomy that was proposed that would justify them being like, what's the application of the principle, or what principle was applied to suggest that they were bad?
There's ethnic targeting triggered by a head of state's public rhetoric, masking of agents, detention without charge, movement of detainees across jurisdictions.
So
But
those are
Claude,
principles.
Claude cautioned me. However, I've trained Claude based on our truth-seeking standards. So Claude said, however, for the show's truth-seeking standard, this deserves honest engagement rather than either reflexive endorsement or dismissal.
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So like what? Well, let's. Oh, yeah. So wait, are any of those principles like, or are they just saying they are lawbreakers more than they are
Oh yeah, no,
violating
I
the?
think my sense is this is very much behavioral, like hopefully outcome based, right? And I think that's sort of a big part of this whole discussion.
Mm,
But certainly just like the tactic. I think it feels more tactical to me. Like I'm trying to like adjust my language. I often say it feels this way. It appears
okay.
more tactical based on the way they're describing it.
So it's how they were doing it
Yeah.
more than what. So okay. So it wasn't any opposition of what they were doing, just how they were doing it.
No, no. Actually, to be clear, yes, I think it's both. But when they describe it, it seems to be about how they show up and how they're incompetent and who they're targeting and the false positives. So it's certainly both.
Got it.
Um,
Got it. Yeah. And did they? And so that was that kind of. Did it feel like that was part of the motivation for? They're trying to do it as lawfully as possible, also based on the training that you're talking about. But the the adamant, or essentially as adamant within the bounds of law resistance as possible, but because of those principal violations.
I don't know why that one's not landing. Can you ask again?
Yeah. So were they the people doing the training? If they consider them Gestapo, or basically comparing them to like literal Nazis, they was that the impetus as to why they wanted to at least examine the full boundaries of the law that they were allowed to resist within, and that they should be informed to? But then resistance would be, I would assume, almost charged as a quote unquote ethical, an ethic. They were like ethically driven to
Hmm.
resist, sort of by any means necessary within the boundaries of the law. Was that kind of the? Would that be a fair way to describe the framing?
Yes. Hmm. I'm scanning to remember if any of it seemed to, you know, explicitly step outside of the boundaries of the law.
Yeah, I'm just assuming
I
with
don't
the
think so, because that was a lot of it was just, very specifically, you're allowed to record, you're allowed to witness as long as you're not obstructing. I mean, that was a big part of it. If you're gonna be there at at
yeah,
a protest or an event or whatever, like don't obstruct, because
yeah,
that's when this does become something they can shut
yeah.
down.
And did they paint that kind of as like the right thing to do is to do whatever you can to stop legally, within the bounds of law, that this would be like this is kind of a good fight or the good thing to do, like good trouble.
Good trouble, not stopping them in the moment, but
Yeah.
recording. A lot of it was just, and I think there's
Oh,
actually some evidence that when this has played out in court, they've used a lot of these recordings, um, to, I don't know, for lack of a better word, do the right thing
got it.
to help the actual judicial system carry out its job. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then do you think the people in that room, this is a conjecture, would they apply that same principle to, say, pro-life activists outside of a clinic? That they should, basically do whatever they can within the law. Recording people would be really helpful. Not obstruction per se, but certainly presence, resistance, organized, observation, making sure everything was being done like properly, etc. Do you think they would apply that same principle of ethical impetus and sort of Gestapo resistance or sort of good bad? I mean, once you say Gestapo, I guess you're in good guy, bad guy framing. So do you think they would apply the same there?
Like against a pro-life advocate specifically.
Like with, let's say, pro-life people doing exactly the same, following the same principles that they're
Oh,
talking about, which is
oh,
harm-based,
a
ethnic
pro-life
targeting.
person doing all of this as a
Yeah, yeah,
means of protest or just even
yeah.
witness or whatever. Yeah.
Witness, record people coming in, maybe not obstruct them, but certainly like actively recording, making sure they're doing things legally as possible. Like would that companion them to the pro-life movement as like fellow good guys? Or do you have a sense based on anybody there or the premises or even just your own sort of empathic or intellectual, conjecture, informed conjecture?
Well, I would conjecture absolutely not. This was a pretty hardcore progressive space. So we didn't talk about abortion, but I have to assume that means it's pro-choice. Um, That's funny. I'm noticing in myself a pretty big distinction between recording agents of any kind, like officials working within the capacity of the law, versus recording somebody like a citizen walking into an abortion clinic. I'm noticing. I'm drawing a distinction there.
Hmm. And why? But the principles are the same, right? In terms of ethnic, outcome based and ethnic specific focus, increased harm, like harm rates, all that sort of thing. You know what I mean? In terms of material outcomes. So you think there would be they would apply the principle differently because it's um, law enforcement versus corporate citizens offering, doing, providing the service, I suppose.
Well, I want to be clear. Are you talking about, I don't know, the clinicians in the clinic or the
Sure,
people?
sure, everybody. I mean, anyone. I mean, this would be anybody, right? This would be the people who are bringing supplies to ICE while they're stationed, or so this could be civilians, or I mean, anybody involved in the enterprise of seizure of people within the boundaries of the country.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. I don't know. I don't think that's the emphasis. So I'd say much more on the agents, the gun holstering agents. Um,
Uh,
so
yeah,
I don't know. I guess the simple answer is no. I mean, if I had to guess, would they apply that principle exactly the same way?
yeah,
Unless, again, like to me, it's like if we're just talking about the officials, the corollary there to me might mean like, I don't know, the clinicians, the people who have the most authority in that. in that zone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So then, so that'd be maybe a better one to one. Then, yeah, filming doctors, nurses, people who are actually like providing the service, like ICE provides the service to the U.S. government. Um, and then, why wouldn't they apply the principle? Is it just based on one is obligated to resist unethical action by one's government, but not by other? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out like what's the is there a is there an ethical principle that is being applied universally, or is it not being applied universally? And is there like a substantive cogent reason to not apply the ethical principle universally?
Well, there's probably better examples of it not being applied universally if I get where you're going. We've talked about abortion ad nauseum. Th- so this particular issue is, I mean, I think we've already determined that this is, as best as I could reason, an exception, and potentially just an outright violation. So
Mm-hmm.
is this is this more about like pro-life protesters or getting us back into the abortion territory as a area of harm?
This is trying to understand the basis upon which bad guy could be claimed.
Hmm.
So it has to be a principle. Like good guy, bad guy can't be people I like and people I don't like, because that's not what good guy, bad guy means. Even this isn't even being semantic conservative. This is just that is the full semantic range of what good guy and bad guy means. So then, if the ethical impetus for resistance are these sorts of essentially conducted harm outside of what is considered to be appropriate and or even legal, perhaps, um, poorly trained, poorly regulated, obviously applies to both fields, and then wanting to see if there's a genuine premise by which good guy, bad guy is assessed, or if it literally has nothing to do with good. I mean, in and of itself, this could dismiss whether good guy, bad guy is even actually part of what anybody's talking about, or if they're just using good guy, bad guy in order to manipulate the conversation. So I was like, since those principles were all relevant there, you'd have to be like, okay, well, is that an actual ethical principle held by the people talking about them? Because then they would need to apply it to multiple scenarios, whether they agreed with them or not. I would actually say most specifically when they wouldn't agree with them, in order for them to be an actual cogent ethical principle. And that's not even getting into what good guy, bad guy is. That's actually like I don't even know, the ramp leading up to the house to climb the steps. Because good guy,
Right.
bad guy is a moral claim, not an ethical claim. So I'm just staying way back here in ethics, like not even close to morals yet, not even close to good guy, bad guy. We're just talking about ethical, unethical, which isn't in order to kind of like slowly get there. And so I'm
Well,
saying if they didn't apply the principle, then would we have to reject it as being a good guy, bad guy relevant framing?
well, it's entirely possible that we ought to come up with a better question because I feel like yeah, this has led us to sort of orbit around probably whatever usefulness exists here. What I can offer you, synthesizing everything you sent with my own
Yeah.
notes, I broke this into three questions. So in the past, sometimes for these much more complex ones, we've had sub questions. So I would like to
Yeah.
offer
Yeah.
those. So the first question is the same: Is ICE the bad guy? And this is I don't know, spans or maybe even abandons political attachment or association, right? Because this
Yeah.
is a structural institutional question spanning 20 plus years. The honest answer the research supports, this is part of Claude's summary, ICE contains a legitimately valuable law enforcement mission, HSI, fused with a deportation apparatus, ERO, that has, under every administration, produced documented abuses, wrongful detentions of citizens, and conditions that kill people. Obama, Biden, and this is all under Title 42, which, as we all know, is the answer to life, the universe, and everything, but in this case has been used to by just about every administration in the last 20 years to deport lots and lots of people. And I think some of this, correct me if I'm wrong, because we spent so much time, in fact, this whole podcast was born out of COVID, um, or our reaction to COVID. That seemed to be a lot of maybe Trump sort of initiated that idea of using Title 42 for medical reasons, but then Biden carried it out. And Biden, in fact, even had claimed in his campaigning that he was going to cancel Title 42, but that did not to be true whatsoever.
Oh
In
yeah,
fact,
yeah.
is that did I piece that together right?
As far as I know, yeah, I don't even know. Well, the funny thing was, if you remember, uh, Trump tried to do a sort of like preemptive, like certain, he was going to ban certain countries or whatever, not allow anyone from China to come in, that sort of thing. Because it did start in China, as far as we know, and that was wildly resisted. But yes, so yeah, I don't actually know. I know it's been used by multiple administrations, and then I know Biden set the record for it for around kicked about 3 million people out. I think some of those were repeats, as you were noting, but 3 million expulsions with zero due process.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and as
tragic.
far as I know, in 2025, 26, we're talking 100 maybe 100 expulsions with. I mean, I have no idea how many expulsions without due process, but as far as I know, it's pretty minimal. And as far as I know, there's actually an entire new system in order to basically do a fast tracked due process to have something.
Right.
So as far as I
So,
know, it's gone down from millions to thousands, which means that we might, if they are good guys, bad guys over time, then at least they're better guys now, or not as bad guys. I don't know.
so this leads us to question two. Is the current progressive outrage hypocritical?
Yes,
And that
but
I wanted to
on purpose.
pick that apart as like
Yeah, that's a good question.
that's separate but important, right?
Yeah, well, I would say, and then I think we've talked about this multiple episodes, so then I can just say it and be quiet. As far as I can tell, and this is also talking to multiple LLMs about it, progressivism specifically, it's a tricky socio-political construct theory set, or set of ideals, I would even say, where what we would formally and formerly and continually refer to as hypocrisy is intentional, meaning it's not hypocrisy within, and I've said this before, it took me a year to figure this out of having conversations with you, that I was like, wait a second, I don't actually think, to be perfectly fair, within the system progressives are not being hypocritical because it is an intentionally hypocritical system. Now, hypocrisy still has a meaning, and hypocrisy really means having universal principles that you don't apply universally. So a bad guy would be someone who's like, well, when you do it, I like you guys, so you get away with it. When you do it, I don't like you guys, you don't get away with it, right? That's a bad guy. That's a hypocrite. Not
And
following
in
the
fact, I
principles.
think it was part of what you sent was it's like the worst form of bad guy, right? Is
Yeah, I would say the one who pretends to be good. This is why we use Hitler all the time, right? Because he said he was doing it for the marginalized, for the folk, the Volk. He was there to like help the marginalized do what's right, like strong moral language, strong ethical system that they follow pretty ethically most throughout. Now, not ethical in the classic sense because it wasn't based on morality; it was immoral. But yeah, that's the worst kind of bad guy is the one who pretends to be good. So I would say
well,
progressivism
and that
within
just doesn't
itself,
apply the principles
yes,
to themselves.
to
Yeah. Okay.
themselves or to anybody they like or whatever. Well, so progressivism is a non-egalitarian. It's a non-egalitarian approach to social reform. It's illiberal, amoral, largely anti-ration. It's like it's antagonistic to, if not opposed to, Enlightenment reasoning. That's stated out loud in critical theory, which underpins modern post 2010 progressivism. So, in some ways, I would say just formally, what we all know generally hypocrisy to mean is to not apply universal principles universally. So, progressivism is hypocritical, but they are hypocritical on purpose. Whereas, let's say, populism, the MAGA movement, is hypocritical in application, not living up to its stated ideals. Progressivism is non hypocritical because it lives up to its stated ideals. However, the ideals themselves intentionally produce the outcome that we criticize, let's say, MAGA for. So, answering that question I think it's a great question. But have you noticed that yourself as well? That like, and again, I've shown you this for sort of I try to show this from the ideals as opposed to the mistakes of, Because I think most of the time we talk hypocrisy, we're like, you're supposed to do this and you did this. Everybody does that. So we're not going to just be like, there's no cohort that fails to live up to
Yeah.
universals in a universal sense. But progressivism specifically is programmed to be what we would call hypocritical, which means, again, it's a trick. It's a weird little trick. I think that the problem is for most people is they don't understand that progressivism is not using around 100 words, many of which relate to equality of treatment, egalitarianism, et cetera, morals, ethics. They're not using them the way that everybody else uses them. So internally, they're not being hypocritical because their system is programmed to be what we would call hypocrisy. I hope that makes sense. I tried to restate it as many times as possible so as to make it clear. Maybe it made it more confusing.
I think so. I mean, and maybe even more intriguing is what a common subject in DEI spaces, progressive, is talking about intent versus impact.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there are those concepts, I think,
Yeah.
working.
So the intent is to be hypocritical in the traditional sense. Like progressives are being hypocritical on purpose. That's the aim and the methodology by which they hope to achieve theoretically. I don't know because I don't think it's ever achieved it, but they would say
But
we are
by
going
naming
to
that, you
yeah.
actually take away the traditional definition of hypocrisy.
Yes. Well, yeah, yeah. Because then it again, as we've noticed across years, it the there is something about the progressive enterprise that is intentionally obscuring language. I on a steel man like best good faith thing in order to change everything that's wrong with language, but I think by the lack of opacity about what it's doing, it's I feel like both the intent and the outcome is not clearly munificent, if that makes
Well,
sense.
that's a more generous offering than you usually give to the reason
Yeah,
for all the language changes.
yeah, it's so exhaustive and it's so comprehensive and it's just so weird to me that a non-egalitarian system is kind of pretending to be egalitarian and a non-moral system uses moral language more than anybody and it's a non-moral, maybe even immoral, really technically system. And so that part of it is so confounding to me that I was like, there has to be bad actors in there somewhere that no one said, wait a second, we should be clear on this. We don't mean what you all mean on these 100 words. So I think it's being done in an obscured fashion, sort of on purpose. And as you note, if you try to oppose or question too hard anybody within that set, the response seems to indicate a pretty general lack of desire for opacity.
Yeah. So the one of the distinctions I thought was interesting in that question
Yeah.
was, we say progressives, obviously that's casting a really wide net. I think I usually mean, I don't know, the average progressive citizen who maybe votes that way, probably, but then maybe on the more extreme is engaged in active protest, et cetera. Distinct from organizations that are actually working on, say immigration advocacy organizations, and that notably, I guess they have been more consistent. The organizations have been more consistent, like the ACLU, Human Rights Watch, suing the Biden administration for Title 42 use, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I don't think that's what makes the headlines, right? I mean, and that may take us into the third question, which is, does hypocrisy invalidate the current concern? I was like pontificating and I was just curious, well, does it matter? Yeah, like, does it matter why someone started caring if what they're caring about is real? And two possible answers. Yes, it matters because unprincipled outrage produces unprincipled policy. I think this is a lot what
Yeah.
you bring up. If the
Yeah.
activism is really about tribal signaling rather than genuine ethics, it will evaporate the moment a Democrat is in power and nothing structural will change. That's Brendan's strongest point, and it's not a small one. And then no, it does
Especially
matter because the people in detention right now don't benefit from the ideological purity of their advocates. A wrongly detained U.S. citizen isn't less wrongly detained because their defender was silent in 2022.
oh, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. Because look at the word they use there, wrongly.
Hmm.
You can't use wrongly. Then you're talking about pure utilitarianism. There has to be an actual system of right and wrong in order to say wrongly. So someone wrongly by what metric? In which case, non-hypocrisy has to be relevant in order for us to use the word wrongly. So this is where, listen, Claude is programmed to be largely sort of progressive. So it slides into this all the time. It's funny. It'll get it when you highlight it. But that's the like you can't this is the crazy thing people maybe don't realize. You can't use wrongly. You have to just use like disliked. You can even use illegal because law doesn't necessarily have to do with right and wrong. Law can be ethical, law can be moral, it can be immoral, it can be unethical. So all these systems, but wrongly is not a unless you're just speaking in terms of pure math or legality. Now, if something is wrongly meaning illegally, then you're like, oh, okay, you're already stretching right and wrong as relates to law, which I think is a very dangerous thing. And I actually think everyone generally would agree on that. If you like sat them down for at least the 5 minutes to explain it, I don't think any of us want law to be the metric of what is right and wrong. Like that's no one. That's just not how humans have ever functioned.
But
We
hopefully
would
it was derived from what's right and wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's how, because that's what we need. We need right and wrong to determine which laws are good and are essentially literally good and bad. Not only because some will serve us, like it is utilitarian. It is of utilitarian benefit to have police of all sorts have sort different qualified immunity because it provides them increased uh, sort of sympathetic external power to manifest their goals. So if the goal is to get rid of 12 million people who are here improperly, then having this organization who feels like they're a little bit like hard to fight, you can't fight them fairly, that's of utilitarian benefit to the law. Meaning it's like, oh, they're scary, let's run away, right? We've had twice as many self deportations than we have ICE deportations because perhaps of some, I would just introduce because of some of that reputational problem. But yeah, it makes a huge difference whether someone does something for a ethical or I would even actually say whether someone does something for a moral reason or an immoral reason, because then it's the why. Now, yes, if someone frees people from a concentration camp just to get personal vainglory, are those people now freed from a concentration camp? Yes. So that aspect of it certainly makes sense. But the thing we're not going to be, like you said, we're not going to be able to analyze the problem accurately. So then we actually don't know what's wrong and what's right in this situation. Because like you said, they showed you in the thing, they were like, this is the paperwork, they need to go somewhere, right? This is the real one. Here's the real paperwork, and here's the administrative warrant, which is not remotely what they originally were supposed to be using. So they need a particular type of paper to be able to go somewhere. And if they go somewhere without that particular type of paper, that's exactly what we need to be recording because they're breaking the law. If anyone enters the country without the appropriate piece of paper, that's exactly where they're not supposed to be. And we should be recording them because they broke the law. So we need to, like, that principle needs to apply to all people in order for it to be a principle that we can apply appropriately, because doing quote unquote good things for quote unquote bad reasons, we lose moral grounding at that point. You're like, well, is it even a good thing if you're doing it for bad reasons? But I don't know. But what do you think?
I'm wondering how we ought to reframe this question. We shouldn't actually do that at this late game in the conversation.
Hmm.
But it's helping me actually understand the nature of the question as as is often what we do here.
Yeah, yeah,
And maybe the point of philosophy, right? Like let's understand the question we're even asking.
yeah.
Um,
What do we think? Why do we think it?
this might be a good time to weave in Minneapolis, because I think that I don't know from where I said I'll be honest, I didn't dig that deep in when it was happening. And by
Mhm.
it, I mean Operation Metro Surge. Um, but I'm still connected to enough kind of activist progressive channels that I mostly what I heard was more people on the street. And in fact, a lot of what I heard, in fact, you were just talking right before this about some version of mutual aid with food sovereignty and just learning
Yeah,
skills and taking care of ourselves and not depending on these systems, that might collapse. And it's like
yeah,
that just seems like a good idea, no matter what's going on.
yeah,
And that I heard a lot about in Minneapolis. Now, again, it was in this context of, well, we're organizing in order to fight back. I mean, that's I'd say the
yes,
overtone of that.
yeah,
Um, and it was bad there. I don't know, at least like brief research, 5% violent criminals in an operation described as targeting the worst of the worst. Um, Two U.S. citizens shot dead, a federal judge threatening the acting director with contempt. So it almost, it's, I don't know, it just seems like it was almost purposely constructed to be just like a preposterous move by the Trump administration to make ICE look like the bad guy. I don't know, at least from a progressive standpoint.
Yeah, I guess I just don't know why they would do that. I don't think, I mean, maybe a little bit to go like, oh, hey, we're serious. But they did the same type of surges across the country. They did it in Texas. They did it a bunch of other states, a bunch of other cities. And other than LA, a little bit Chicago, not quite as much, but a little bit. And then Minnesota, this didn't happen. So it's not,
You mean in
to
the
me,
other
that,
areas, the
yeah,
resistance didn't happen?
the
Yeah.
resistance didn't happen. No one was getting shot in the street. No one was kicked and the man who got shot in the street was spitting on officers and kicking their taillights out the day before. And and then the woman who got shot was, and yes, people were like, no, she pulled away from him. I don't, she hit him with a car. We all watched the video. He literally, his feet on the ground, sliding backwards as the car pushed him. So did he freak out? Whatever. Like, again, I thought that one was a justifiable shooting. Was it a good shooting? I mean, in a legal sense, yes. Was it a good thing that it happened? No. The Alex Preddy shooting was way less of a good shooting. That was like people freaking the heck out. I think it seemed like a gun went off. We don't know why, whose gun went off. It seemed like the gun went off possibly in the officer's hand, and everyone reacted like the person on the ground had the gun. That was just ab- abysmal. That wasn't ICE, though, just, to be clear. Um, so but people were, the woman who drove over, who ran into the dude with her car, also was part of the team obstructing people. They were obstructing frequently. They would like pull in front of officers and like race alongside them, honking their horns, and pull in front of them to make them have to go around. That's obstruction. If you impede someone's directional flow, especially a law officer. So yeah, did disgusting things happen? Absolutely. Um, I don't understand. Like, there already was plenty of a tough presence going on, so I don't really see the benefit of being like, we're gonna go be the bad guys. I think they were like, we're gonna go be good guys hardcore, and it
Mm.
doesn't matter what sort of bad guys resist us, whether it's the governor or your local judges, but like, we're going to enact rule of law. And nothing they did was outside of the realm of law. Some of it was outside of previous norms as to law in terms of the warrants. The warrant situation is probably the biggest shift. But even that was used 100 something times. So 5% criminals, who's to say why is violence the worst of the worst? That's a completely subjective interpretation of what that means. And also targeting, if 5% of the people you got were also violent criminals, isn't that a target? Like, if you look at a target for like a bow and arrow, right? You're aiming at the target, and if you hit 5% bullseye on like, oh, that really is, those were child traffickers, sexual assault, that's not violence. Trafficking children is not violence. Molesting kids is not violence. So I was like, I don't know why that's the random category. So to me, this is the thing I keep noticing. These random category changes, this is like a progressive linguistic tactic we've noticed across multiple fields now. Crime to a regular person or in the dictionary, crime means you broke the law. If your kid steals gum from a store, they're like, you just committed a crime. You stole something. It doesn't matter that that's a misdemeanor. That's not how humans talk. So if you're talking to humans, crime is all law breaking. So anyone who's here illegally has broken a law. And they've actually, in many ways, you would say broken perhaps one of the most fundamental laws.
I think
Meaning,
one of the distinctions they often make is, no, I'm not going to figure out what it is.
yeah,
That was my thing.
that happens to me probably 17
I,
times a
why
day.
did they keep moving everything? Oh my
I wish
God.
it was. And then yes, many people try to make the distinction between criminal and civil
Thank you.
litigation. Uh, that's not what crime means. That's what crime means in the legal system. But unless you're working in the legal system, that's not what that word means. That's not what it means, guys. Like this is so to me, I was like, you're shifting. This is why I'm a semantic conservative. I'm like, no, let's be specific. And then if that specific thing that you said only applies to that specific thing, great. But crime means breaking the law in any way. And sovereignty laws or border sovereignty laws are, in many ways, the most fundamental, first and foremost type of law as far as the law is concerned. I'm not saying whether it's moral or immoral to have boundaries. It's definitely ethical and it's definitely universal. It exists in every culture across the planet. Boundaries have existed and they've enforced boundaries. That's just how all large communities and even small communities have operated. So if you can't, if you in your fundamental act of being in a place have said I already ignore your law doesn't apply to me, that's a it's a violation of like territorial sovereignty in and of itself. So if you come onto native land, you come onto Chippewa land, and let's say Chippewas say, in order to come onto this land, when you get to where we are from, you must beeline to where you see any Chippewa or you see our tribe. You must come and tell our tribe you're here. If you put an arrow, just unnotch it and pull it back, we're going to kill you. Like, and that's fair. That's fair. That's their rules, right? So if you from the very beginning don't offer the proper obeisance to those whose territory it is. This is like, we could take this down to you're a shoe off, shoe on household. And if someone comes in, it's like, fuck you, I don't care what you do in your house. Okay, that's just sort of rude. But in terms of like territorial sovereignty and group identity and group cohesion, that's a massive worst. Does it hurt me personally? No, I barely care at all. But that's not how we estimate whether a law is good or not, of like how it affects me, right? That would be a highly egotistical form. So that's what I mean is just like, I don't see anything but pretty strong hypocrisy in terms of the opposition of it, while fully admitting flaw. Only Christy Nome or whoever, and that's why hopefully why she's not working there anymore. Like, honestly, delusional people who are like, we have done nothing wrong here. Come on now, any organization, if you're trying to distribute ice cream in a neighborhood, you've done something wrong at some point. You stopped where you shouldn't. You handed someone a sherbet when you were supposed to hand them a waffle cone. You know what I mean? Like what? We're all effing things up on a daily basis. So again, it's not about claiming perfection because we're human beings. We're aiming for perfection, but we don't claim it. If that makes sense. So that, as far as I could tell, that's what was happening in Minneapolis. And then you had the actual government being openly insurrectionist. And we saw this in the 1960s too, where states were just like resisting. It's the same. Minnesota did the same thing that the southern states did when they resisted integration. Federal law said, this is the law. This is what we're going to do. And the state said, no, that's overreach. You can't tell us what to do. And the state actors, the governor or whatever, openly was resistant. Judges in the state sided with the governor, which is the same thing that happened in the South when they had to forcibly integrate schools to make federal law apply to where it applied. But the deportation of citizens who aren't supposed to be there is just literally just following the law. And I think a lot of people just got lulled into the thing of like, well, we just people haven't really done that much, so they just didn't keep the law. But just because someone didn't keep the law doesn't mean the law ever went away. And actually, in some ways,
No,
that's one of the most dangerous things of all, right? Because it creates this whole marginalized class of people who are allowed to break the law and then they don't get punished, which destabilizes all society. And then they're also stuck in this crazy limbo where it's like, this is only whatever. We have limited data on this because the whole thing is that it's assumed to be underreported. But if you exist in this like quote unquote undocumented, illegal occupancy state, I have to assume, and this is my negative view of humanity, sexual assault rates, rape rates, robbery rates, violence rates, etc., across the entire cohort are almost certainly higher than reported
yeah,
because
you're probably
we're going
constantly
to get,
confronted with horrible decisions, and
yeah,
yeah,
you're like, oh, do I report them because then they get deported? Okay, well, they only raped me once. Or do I report this rape and I get deported? You know what I mean? Like, what? this is a phenomenally destabilizing thing. So I
That's
don't, that's the thing I don't understand is like, to me, it just seems like the protesters were the bad guys resisting the often inept good guys.
well, my reaction to what you just said reveals some of my bias because I thought you meant
Yeah.
like crimes against immigrants, like that they would be compromised by being here in various ways, which I also, but I let's assume both are true to some degree. One of the things I think this came from the training was talking about how people are often coming in, like immigrants are often if let's say undocumented, are it's the recommendation is that they come in first and then seek asylum. Because if they meet somebody at the border, that person basically makes their entire decision. And then if they get rejected, that's it. They don't get to go through the whole asylum process. So I think that was maybe that weaves in here to some degree. Like, oh, and because they're getting people to who don't speak the language to sign documents and deport themselves and et cetera. So um
But that would
I'm
be the
I'm wondering.
pragmatic, that'd be the pragmatic effort of the individual person. But are we, this is the crazy thing is progressivism often claims to be a collectivist program. So it means the needs of the one do not outweigh the needs of the many. So if someone needs to have to make an asylum thing, and then it's better for them if they break the law in order to get inside and then try to get back into the law because it's more pragmatic for the outcome for that individual person. But then that violates collective agreement to do so. So then this is what I'm saying. Like
From a
this is
legal
then
standpoint,
from a legal and even simply, well, yeah, unless you're even saying that ethically, even ethically, because then the ethical claim of do groups get to decide what laws are, like collectives. So do collectives get to decide that there are laws for things? And as far as I know, everyone agrees that yes, collectives do get to define laws for themselves. People disagree on which laws, how far, when, to whom, all that sort of stuff. But like,
so it also begs an interesting question that may be implicit, but I'd like to make more explicit is do progressives think we should just collapse the borders? I mean, that's certainly one of the political
yeah,
criticisms. Just like, you want to let everybody in.
sure,
But
sure.
that would be implied by that ethical reasoning, right? Like, oh, well, they should be out, one I think kind of reasonable thing is, hey, we have lots of land and lots of resources. We don't distribute them terribly well. So we could take a few more people. So that would maybe be one way to say, yeah, that person is justified to basically break the law and then go
Yeah,
through a process to be able to live here. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Which then, okay, like what's the one for one? Like, why is it that particular one that's allowed? You know what I mean? Like, it's an extreme. Once you start breaking universality, I think generally you're in a pretty dangerous territory that requires an enormous amount of justification. So that's when
Well,
I
that's
think
what I'm wondering is, would they universally just say, look, this is a way to like get around the fundamental problem, which is these borders suck and we should just get rid of them all. I'm like, I don't
well,
know, actually.
I get but who what I guess yes, and you're trying to well, this is a huge part of the progressivism, which is throwing out most of the systems by which all human progress has been gained. Progressivism is openly anti-science. They use scientific evidence, but if you use it selectively and you rely on the lowest form of it, quite often expert consensus, then you're not pro-science in any way that we know. They've suggested that objectivity or rationalism are pretty much just like tools for the oppressor. Liberalism, whatever, it's sort of anti-religious. Certainly, I would say it sort of tends anti-Christian. Um, Anti-egalitarian. I mean, it's really so. Then, likewise, yes, it's throwing out the idea of legal rule. But I think that my whole premise is that progressivism is the encoding of mores, which is consensus-based norms, as morality, and that informs everything. So the progressive looks around themselves and says, "Well, our majority says these aren't good. That means it's bad morally." So it's to me, it's actually a category confusion. And so likewise, it would apply there. So I was like, but wait, but what nation in the world has ever tried no borders and had it play out well? typically borderless states get subsumed by other states. I cannot think of a counterexample. So it just means whatever. If Ukraine was like, cool, open borders, it's Russia. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like we cease to be.
Like, oh,
Same about
thanks. I'll
housing.
take
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's applying like the idea of communal living, which is certainly intriguing to me as like in a small version, but then it applies it. I don't even think it functions for a house. And so
No.
if you can't even make it function for your house, that like when you have your dad's memorial, I mean, whoever wants to come in can come in. I mean, yeah, within reason, you know. I mean, certainly anybody who knew and loved my dad and wants to just be part or sit quietly here and be part of our process, that's fine. But if someone wants to come in with a garbage bag, dump all the food in their garbage bag, do what they want, piss in the sink, what you know what I mean? Like there are some codes of conduct, or everyone puts up some sort of boundaries of who can stay and who can go in every situation for the safety of often the most vulnerable in the collective already. So again, are we all still part of the moral human family? Is an immigrant less of a moral person? No, they're less of a legal person. That's why the pro-life thing is always important to bring up here, because they do have a non-citizen has reduced legal personhood in our legal system, and I think universally, I don't think there's a single country on the earth that doesn't do the same thing. And likewise, the unborn are denied legal personhood or offered it in severely, limited fashion, that sort of thing. So I mean, I don't. All this tumbles around. It's pretty interesting stuff, and it does
Do we
help
want
us
to,
answer our question.
yeah, do we want to come in for landing and answer?
Well, what's the and you were in the training. This is actually my third question was, what is the ask? Like, what is the thing that would need to change to where they would no longer be referred to as Gestapo? Like in a 2 hour training, they must have been like, what are the changes that are
Not the
being
ask of
implemented
us,
here?
but what do we want them to do differently?
Yeah, yeah. Like what would stop the resistance?
Well, that's kind of funny because I was contemplating a reframe of the question, and what one thing that came up with is ICE causing harm through its incompetence. So, I mean, I don't think, and this is pretty somewhat common in progressive spaces, just because you have limited airtime. Maybe you don't have time to air out all the complexities. Um, but there's like no airtime, more or less, especially in that training, given to the the fact that there are, let's say we've talked about this, there's false positives. I don't know. I don't even take 5% as a good number, whatever.
Yeah,
Now, nevertheless, there's no airtime given to, hey, there are like human trafficking, as one example, is a real fucking problem that hopefully we can all
awful.
agree is bad. Can we
Yeah,
just say it's
don't
bad?
like it. Bad. Don't take people where they don't want to go, and it hurts them.
And there is some measure of success. We could argue about how much and how it's
Yeah.
done. Some measure of success within this institution to reduce that.
Yes.
So, that I don't hear is talked about. It wasn't brought up in the training. It's much more of just like bad. They're just bad. Shut it all down. I think honestly, if I were just to kind of frame it simply coming out of that, it's like it should all be shut down. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
I hope there's more complexity behind that. They do have to make choices for a training. Um, I think a more reasonable uh, answer would be, as is often the case here in Chicago, we talk about the cops all the time.
Yeah.
You know, can we train them better? Can we especially train them not just in how to hold their guns better, but like in things like mental health? Can we, in this case, I guess they pulled a lot of the Spanish training. Like, is there anything about the way they're operating that could be improved? A, to reduce the false positives, and then B, to, I don't know, be more human about it so that the people who are wrongly detained, oh, there I go again, wrongly, who are detained, um, and later released, later found to have been serving no, like breaking no law,
Yeah.
I think that's what we mean by attempt to mean by wrongly. Um, so basically some version of like, can they just be much better at doing the job that is morally valid, which would be
Yeah.
reducing
I think
harm. Yeah.
I think universally, I don't know anybody who would disagree with that. Like, I think that's the universal, everyone agrees with that on every, from the white supremacist Christian nationalists to the progress, to like the intersectional progressive, like, and everyone in between. Can we do things better? Man, hopefully. As far as I can tell, this is the attempt by the Trump administration to do all of this better. Like, more people get trials. Are the trials great? Not fantastic. They're fast. Some are fast, and a lot of them are JAG judges now, and like, or JAG like lawyers as judges for expedited removal. Is it better? Yes. And is it more fair? Meaning, like, are they simply just applying the laws instead of applying some of them and not other of them? It seems to be better in that metric. So it seems to be more egalitarian. And then if there's ethno targeting, how would there not be? We're we're literally talking about which nations are here the most. That's, of course. I mean, that's literally like if you had other adjacent countries and you're like, well, you know, whatever, I don't know, the Norway and Sweden, right? Some people are sneaking from Sweden and Norway. They're probably allowed in those, you know, those delightful Scandinavian countries. But let's say they aren't, right? You're like, well, if someone's speaking
They've already
Norwegian,
fixed all this, by the way. They figured everything out.
yeah. Well, it's funny. They tried the more aggressive, like let everyone in, and now they're slamming the brakes harder than any other section in the UK. So, sorry, in the European Union, EU. So yeah, that's the. I think universally, yes, everyone already agrees that everyone can do things better today and tomorrow. And I think every ICE agent would say that. I think every police officer would say that. Every fire department person would say that. Maybe sometimes maybe the head would be like, dude, we're doing the best we can with the money we got. You know what I mean? They might lose that sort of cranky complaint.
Probably looks like a middle-aged black chief from Lethal Weapon too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're a loose cannon. One of those kind of guys. But yes, can we do things better? Always. But I think that's the programmed always. And I see a absolute bad faith assumption that like they're trying to make this worse is like one of the craziest things I've heard in terms of I was like, what did they change that makes this worse? Like, what do you mean? They're making all these things materially better, which means they're just doing it more. So I actually think you think worse means doing their job more, premise wise. And you're like, these minor increases in harms exist and they're real, but you're taking a real thing and acting like it's a net thing. And that doesn't make it, like, that's just materially false. Like, I think it's even slightly more tenable to be like the protest resistance movement is actively trying to make it worse. Like, they're trying to provoke a response, broadly speaking. Not everyone doing it, but enough people, again, are trying to provoke a violent response. Again, I'm sure you've seen some of the same things. People filming the assaults on ICE agents have gone up 1,300%, 30, somewhere between 1,300 and 2,500%. So the harm to ICE, who is also our neighbor, also human beings, also just as morally valuable as anybody here, legally or illegally, the harm on them statistically has gone up. I think the increase in like wrongful detainments has gone up like twice times two. Over here, it's gone up 22,000%. So 200%, 2,000%. Like, if we're just focusing on harm increases, why are we focusing on the smallest harm increase while also kind of being part of the cohort that's part and parcel to the 2,000% harm increase? Like that, that's the whole thing I do not understand. But again, I don't think that it's not internally hypocritical. It's hypocritical on purpose, meaning the intersectional progressive specifically does not believe that everyone is equally worthy. It believes in moral hierarchies distributed to specific people. So it would specifically say, like, an ICE agent, even the all Latin team who killed Alex Pretty, all Latin shooters, shot a white guy. So like intersectionally, I'm sure that was confusing, but there is the simple, like, you can harm those who have less moral worth. This is how all supremacist systems have been going on. So to me, the whole good guy, bad guy, your statement, I absolutely agree with. Can we do things better? Yes. Should we do things better? Yes. Almost must we do things better? Yes. Have we already done things better? I would say arguably yes. And then the impetus has to be equally put upon anybody. Meaning, if you're part of the resistance movement, your job is to do things better also. And I would say, like, calling ICE Gestapo, how is that different than being like immigrants or filth? Immigrants are all the worst of the worst. All of them are the worst of the worst. Like, wouldn't that be the equal response? Because if ICE is just Gestapo, then
Yeah,
then
I
you would
think
have to you would have to you would have to use the extreme language to compare it on the other side. Whereas I've not heard that as like
it's
as an all term like that.
yeah, to me that was distracting. And to the extent there is any sort of
Sure, sure.
officialization or consistency in this training, I'm not sure. Um,
Yeah.
it's like, do they all use the same PowerPoint? I don't know. Probably, because there were some nice slides, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, that's where this gets, challenging because she was weaving in personal bias. There were even sort of conjecture about that exact phenomenon of like, oh, these Latin men, and she was a psychologist, so she's like, well, they joined the other side because of this and that. It's like, do we know why they joined?
Yeah.
But I would say functionally, if you set some of the personal conjecture aside, functionally, I liked the training
Yep.
because it was about basically gathering evidence.
Yep.
And that is like probably that's the cornerstone of probably every corporate training program. It's like we're gonna
Yeah.
gather data. How well was this thing done? And then we're gonna try
Yeah.
to do something with that data to make
Do it.
things
Yeah,
better.
yeah.
So to that extent, I think the training fundamentally was about because it was very specifically, explicitly about don't engage, don't pick a fight, mostly
Yeah.
just for our own safety. Um, so that feels positive that's at the core of it. Now we have our could argue have argued about why, is that really the core and why is it there? But that's what I took away from it was, the main thing here is like if somebody's if somebody, especially somebody in law enforcement who has we have given more power in various ways. Um, just gather evidence, just gather data, you know, and then
Yeah.
but don't take it upon yourself to make the assessment of of what they're doing in that moment, or as we've said quite a bit in this episode, especially, uh, don't let what's happening now give us amnesia about what's happened over the last 20 years.
Yeah. 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 That has been happening for a very, very long time. Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
or just because some of us became aware for whatever reason, let's yeah, do our best to not just imagine this is just happening now or it's happening for all the wrong reasons.
yeah. Although it's interesting, I have to ask that person, whoever was putting that point to bear, which is important to have, is have they been referring to this as Gestapo for that entire time in terms of context? Because then you invite this interesting thing, which is sending people out. Don't obstruct the Gestapo. That doesn't make a lick of sense. So
I
that is
agree.
where,
Like when I heard that, I was like, how is this useful? Could you just button that up? Like,
yeah, I was like, if they're gonna be Gestapo, dude, no, you know, your moral impetus is to stop them.
right.
You die stopping them. But if you're just supposed to capture and you don't make the evaluation, this to me is also a repetition of the hierarchy of power in progressivism, which is the individual actually doesn't decide very much because it is a pseudo collectivist oligarchy, whereas you default to what the expert class tells you is true. It's a sort of functions kind of like priests used to function, like pre Protestant Reformation. So that to me is wild. Like, we've decided, don't decide whether what they're doing is right or wrong in the moment. We've already decided they are wrong, but sometimes they do stuff that's legal. So you don't decide, individual. You're not in charge here. You're not sovereign here. Like we who conduct the training, who put the ideas forth, we are sovereign. So to me, that's the creepy. That's a creepy. So then, yes, are you giving people useful things? Sure. Cult leaders who made people kill themselves also taught people how to farm well. You know what I mean? So you can dispense, and every single malevolent force in modern history has also provided material support for people. We can have the mafia boss bringing through turkeys for Thanksgiving in the neighborhood. We have him like, oh, he's a booster. He gives money to the local boys and girls club. You know what I mean? This is just always so like providing good things is hey, nice. Those are meaning useful. Those are excellent. Great. It's good to have food when you're hungry. That is helpful in a utilitarian fashion, ethically speaking. But it's fascinating to me the whole. But it's also programming an entire cohort to be like, go forth, but it's not your decision to make. It's our decision to make. Like we decide who the Nazis are, not you.
Well, it certainly doesn't leave room for much subtlety in even understanding what ICE is. So I'm grateful that we could explore that. And
Yeah,
um, a, a much easier question to answer might be, is ICE causing harm through its incompetence? And it's like, to your point, it's like, yeah, and that's everybody.
of course they are. Yeah, and are the protesters causing harm through their incompetence? Yes. Am I causing harm through my incompetence on a daily basis? Probably to my children and wife and myself. Yes. That's a universal. I don't know anybody who isn't.
Right.
Is ICE good? Is ICE the bad guy, or are ICE the bad guys? Wrap up vote. I'm gonna go. I guess they're not now.
Well, you've been consistent, I think.
Yeah.
The difference in pluralization is meaningful to me because I'm now extremely confused about calling an institution good or bad. That seems like
Yeah.
to your point, for pointing out the moral reality of that framing. Um, this seems weak sauce, not to have a crystal clear answer, but um, I'm gonna go from my sideways
Side thumb.
to diagonal.
Diagonal and diagonal. What's
I'm
that? 40, like a
drifting. I'm
drifting
drifting
down.
down.
A
I'm
45-degree
drifting to
down.
know that. God, that sounds like a movie or a song or something. I'm drifting to know.
Drifting towards no. Yeah, it's like a poem. It's like a tone poem of a film.
But I think
That's,
my initial framing of the question was not terribly helpful. Well,
I think it
helpful
was
in the
very
sense of
helpful.
this exploration, but maybe that's the whole
Yeah.
deal.
I think helpful because I think this is the dominant nomenclature. People just use sub and sops. My father has said this to me. I couldn't even tell you how many times. Oh, they're brown. They're Hitler's. They're Hitler's brown shirts. They're the Gestapo. Like has used all sorts of language, which means bad guy. That's it's just it's a cultural way of saying they're off. They're evil. They're the Stasi. They're the secret police. They are the bad guys. And you're just like, that doesn't, I don't see it. I don't see it. Can you explain it to me? All
And you're
right.
welcome. I've managed to serve the progressivism question back to you on a silver platter. So there you go.
This is, I think it's the great revelator is like this, the thesis just gets stronger by by the subject.
Well, I'm grateful we can explore and
Yeah,
ask better questions.
let's try. Let's try. Let's try to think together because,
That's reducing our incompetence.
reduce our incompetence, therefore reduce our harm, hopefully.
Indeed.
Thank you
Love
for
you.
helping me. Love you.
Bye.